We're going to have lots of expertise shared by our expert panel. We'll also have breakout sessions where we're going to uncover some themes and have a chance to share perspectives. When we come back together, we'll discuss some emerging themes, but we will also save plenty of time for question and answer. And before we part today, we're going to provide you with some takeaway gifts to get you started. All right, so let's talk about our Zoom setup. To enhance your experience, please click at the right top of your screen and select side by side speaker view. We have everybody on mute. We will go ahead and let you unmute when we go into the breakout sessions, but we're also going to be monitoring that chat. So don't hold back. Throw your questions in there, any comments that you might have. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And this experience is best when everyone participates. All right, so let's do a few introductions. So, as you know, I'm Marcy McMahon, Director of Client Success, but I also have the incredible privilege of leading our impressive consulting team here at HR Collaborative. And this is a perfect segue from a career spent helping organizations turn people strategies into business outcomes that are scalable and impactful. So, I have two of our internal members of the consulting team here that I'm proud to introduce. In addition to her client work here, Sarah Zevelking has led people operations at the Grand Rapids Downtown Market, John Ball Zoo, and Frederick Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park. Sarah specializes in building HR foundations from the ground up and in guiding executive teams through change. We also have next to me here Sandy Carmen, another of our consultants. She brings deep expertise leading people and culture for organizations like Corewell Health, Cherry Health, and Forest View Hospital. Sandy is passionate about helping organizations build great workplaces with strong teams and competent leaders. Next, I'd like to introduce Grace Gavin, co-founder and author of No Honesty. I have a copy of her book right here, which I'm sure that she could tell us how we can get a copy of that. But Grace is a trusted voice on what it takes to build cultures of open, honest communication. Grace's expertise helps break down barriers and create safe spaces to speak up and be heard. Then we have at my far side here, Jeff Dashner, Chief Operating Officer of the West Michigan Hispanic Chamber. Jeff brings senior leadership experience across retail and nonprofit. He has led high-performing teams through seasons of growth, change, and cost pressure. He's going to share some practical guidance on pitching today's concept in a way that resonates with executive leadership. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our topic and hear from our panelists. I've got some questions on my notes here that I'm going to direct to the group, and they will be going ahead and responding, and you can throw your questions and comments right into the chat. All right, so for everyone, what is the why behind creating a voice of the employee culture, if you will? So why is this such a priority one?
I think it's something that's always been a priority, but it's coming out now more than ever because when we look at listening cultures, these are creating spaces where we're able to retain the employees more. Engagement is higher. Research shows that organizations are 9 times more likely to reach their goals and business outcomes when you do have a culture of listening and employees are able to weigh in and they know that we're going to act on it.
That's great. I think it's key to remember what is your business made up of? It's people, right? And if we are not getting their perspective, hearing their voice, I mean, what is the point? They got to feel like they belong to it. They're part of the mission. And how you do that is through listening, hearing what they're saying. Where are their frustrations? Where are things going well? Where can we continue to improve things? If you help them feel part of the mission, you're going to retain them longer, like Sandy said. It's so much more important. Yeah. And I saw a stat the other day. It said that employees who feel heard and respected are 4.6 times more empowered to do their best work. So can you imagine if you have your people doing their best work simply by helping them feel heard? I mean, it's as simple and as difficult as that is.
As simple, it is difficult as it sounds.
Yeah. So this is just a way to align your people strategy with your business strategy.
Absolutely.
So you are, like Grace said, you want the people who are most impacted by your decisions. Why not hear what they have to say? And hopefully this turns you into a more um, proactive versus reactive organization. And when you're hearing issues and you can act on those sooner.
And from the C-suite perspective, for me, when I take a look at that particular topic, it's about how do you minimize disruption to your operation? And it just creates stability within the organization, the opportunity to hit the goals and outcomes that either the board has put on the C-suite team or the C-suite team has for the organization as a whole, whether it be for just making payroll or for stockholders. So it's a great way to just minimize disruption to the organization, maintain talent, also to attract top talent within the business model that you have.
That is awesome. And I know 80% of small to mid-sized businesses in Michigan are planning to scale this year, 2026. And stability is 100% a requirement for scaling. So that is huge. Okay, for Grace, would you say from your research and the book and all of your work in this area, is this something we would consider a nice to have in an organization or more of a must have, and why?
In my opinion, it's a must have. I think the question becomes, what do you want to have your day be like each day? Whether if you think about that from your employee perspective, what do you want their day to be like? You as a leader, what do you want your day to be like? And if you want to live in chaos and you don't know what's going on, if people aren't aligned and you're going 7 different directions rather than the one that you've chosen, I mean, that's a choice that you can make. So in that way, maybe you don't necessarily have to, but I think it is a must have. If you want to have a more aligned team, you want everybody on the same page. So I think that's an obvious one to be, at least. It's a must have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really outlines it. So what would you say as a group are the benefits of really having this structure, this listening culture, if you will?
The benefits for me are, similar to what Sarah said. You're having the people on the front line, the people doing the work, helping to inform and feel empowered to inform the direction that your organization is going. And I think that, we're looking at several different factors that weigh into this. We have to look at the systems that are set up. We have to ensure that people are feeling heard, but then also how are our leaders set up for this? And so one of the benefits that comes out of this is being able to equip and train leaders to listen fully with empathy, with curiosity, because everybody comes to work wanting to do their best job and wanting to see the organization themselves, their team succeed. And so by adding that piece around empathy for the leaders, um, and circling back and making sure the employees feel heard. I mean, you heard in the statistics that Grace just shared, people will do a better job. They'll be engaged uh, to do better work.
And with that engagement, you're gonna retain your top talent. With today's labor market, yes, you want to hold on to those people, and a happy employee is hopefully going to stay with your organization, grow with your organization, and hopefully bring other people, happy employees, to your organization. And so, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me on the C-suite side, it's how does it align well with your overall strategy for the organization and plugging into that strategy and complementing the successful outcome of what you're tasked to do. It really challenges the turnover notion if you can reduce that for that stability piece, but also the ROI to the organization by the investment and I kind of line it with how does it align well with strategy, but also how does it take care of pain points that the organization may have or it wants to avoid, and that's where the C-suite can really benefit from those types of investments.
Where have you seen that play out? Some possible good business outcomes that you've seen from actually working within a structure of listening.
Yeah, in my case, I've done that across retail, big corporate retail industries, as well as the private nonprofit sector. And probably the most biggest impact that I've had was in the nonprofit sector, where we've had some safety security staff with a lot of turnover. So if you're familiar with that industry of safety security, it's a high turnover industry where I think the norm is around 60% turnover just with staff. It's a high stressful job. And when we did a listening culture, we dropped that thing down to in the mid-teens from the high 80s, and that was really a huge aha moment uh, for me in that part of the career to be able to slow down enough to hear what's going on with the staff. And so if you just calculate the cost of hiring, training, and factor in a high turnover rate and that 60% dropping it into the teens, the math is real easy to say. It's like that's worth the investment all the time. But it does lead to changing some strategy. So we had some strategies that we needed to change significant. But definitely the outcome on that was staff felt heard, they felt safer, and they felt respected by the senior team by saying, "Hey, we're listening to you." They were included in the strategy and the policies that ended up changing for them, and the organization flourished because of it.
That is awesome. What a great case study, too. And I think, the numbers alone make the case as far as lowering the cost of turnover and recruiting and replacing and that labor churn that is so costly, but also the engagement level. And everyone here is saying the same thing, the engagement level of the employee who stays and sees that they're heard and that what their voice says really matters. How engaged is that employee? So really great. Um, let's hear about from maybe Sandy and Sarah a little bit. What would a good intentional structure look like in an organization? What would be some of the tenets of that structure?
I think definitely making sure that you have multiple channels. You can get that feedback. So that can be a blend of informal channels, whether that be surveys or it can be, just walking around and hearing what people have to say one on one. So making sure that you have multiple feedback channels, making sure that it's a safe space to provide feedback. Uh, that psychological safety is super important. Wonderful feedback.
And then it's really good. Really good. Grace, do you want to talk a little bit about psychological safety?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those phrases that we hear a lot now, and it's really important. But a lot of times, what I find with leaders happen, if I say psychological safety, I kind of lose them. They're like, well, you want me to do that on top of hitting my goals and my strategy? I don't even know what that means. I'm tuned out. It's overwhelming. And I think really, the way that I think about it, to simplify it for leaders, psychological safety is really just, do your people have the opportunity to be honest with you without fear? Uh, and maybe not even totally without all fear, but are they willing to take that risk with you? Is there safety in the risk? That's what it is, psychological safety. I am safe to make a risk here. And my risk of being honest, like it might be, I see sometimes with clients, like this process isn't working and we've got to rebuild it from the ground up. And now I, as the leader, that's a lot of work to do. But isn't it better to rebuild the process and make it actually work versus just trying to limp along with this broken one? The people who are doing the work don't feel safe enough to say anything. So psychological safety is it's the root of all of this. But as a leader, if you hear that, you get a little afraid. You're not alone in that. It's just, are your people safe?
I think it's good to normalize that struggle a little bit because as leaders, sometimes you are a bit nervous what will come out of this, right? I mean, will I be called on the carpet for my leadership skill or maybe some deficit there or my planning or something like that? So there can be some fear. How would you suggest that we help leaders grow into that life of having a listening culture and psychological safety? Daddy one.
Well, I think with this, some of it will need to be trained, and there definitely needs to be coaching and practice along the way. And having a mentor to help you as the leader learn some good uh, tools for listening, some good phrases that are more open and empathetic, not being defensive. And there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it because, as a leader, you have a lot of responsibility to care for other individuals as well as meeting your KPIs and your goals and attending all the meetings. So it is a lot. But some things that as an HR professional we can do is help to provide the templates, the tools that make it easier, take off the administrative burden because there's the emotional labor side that they have to do, help with coaching and practicing, um, and helping to embed it into things that they're already doing to be able to allow for that time to listen and also to be able to circle back because one of the most important pieces is keeping the communication lines opening, closing the loop. Even if we can't do everything right now, what have we done? Where are we at? And the why?
That is key, closing a loop. Yeah. And you don't have to have all the answers right away. In fact, as a leader, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Like, what do you do? What is important to do and maybe not do in creating this listening culture? Like, for example, let's say we collect some feedback. What do we do with it now? Now that we have,
So silence is the worst thing that you could do. And I think that's the number one thing I hear from people is I did this survey or I gave this feedback and it went nowhere. And then it was, radio silence, and that does not build trust. So I think definitely communication loop is so important during this when you're doing all of building this culture. And so making sure that you're taking that data and compiling it and getting if you can find root causes and you can find patterns and separating that into what are some easy wins? What are some things that we can do now? And then what are more systemic issues that are going to take longer? And then communicating that. And then what are some things that maybe there's no way we're going to do that as an organization, but also explaining why. And then communicating that back to the employees and saying, hey, here's what we heard. Thank you. Thanking them for the feedback, of course. But here's what we heard. Thank you for your feedback. Here's what we're going to do. Now, here's what we're going to work on that we're going to implement with policy change or throughout as we build this XYZ strategy, we're going to take this feedback into consideration. And here are some things that we just can't do because.
So don't shy away from the tough ones.
No, and explain the why. Yeah, right. I think almost sounds like we're creating a safe space for leaders to respond as well and be honest and truthful about what we can do, what we can't do, what we might be able to do. That's really important. What are some? So we have heard collection channels a couple of times. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
So, collection channels are different ways that we're able to bring in the feedback, right? We have surveys that we could do, not just the annual engagement or feedback survey, but if you're wanting to look across the entire employee life cycle, your onboarding survey, check ins at your 60, 90, 120 days, as well as exit interviews or surveys. And then there's the human component, the face to face, the one on ones, where we're sitting down with them to have, is it step down or step up interviews to seek feedback. Manager one on ones are a great opportunity to take that feedback in. So these are just some of the different modes and collection channels. And others could be through just listening and observing. And so if I'm listening and observing and I'm trying to dissect, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why are we having turnover in this area? I heard that somebody is doing fine, but maybe they're having a tricky time adjusting. You can also use, and this was a great resource that was just recently shared, prompts within AI, within ChatGPT that can help bring to the surface things that are going on, and then you can circle back, ask, help me understand, um, and really get to the root cause of some of these things.
I think you just talked about like both formal and informal. And I think like the informal ones are often overlooked. And it's almost like, what is the meeting after the meeting about? You know, that's a big one where you're going to get some feedback. And then also patterns of employee relation cases could be a trigger of, hey, here's something that we may have a feedback that we can gather. You know, is it in a certain area? Is it a certain manager?
Right, can use that as you can isolate some of those pain points a little bit better in that survey mode, right? Yeah. So I'm hearing some great thoughts on the employee with the leader, the employee with the manager, how to gather feedback that way. What about some peer groups? What do you think about that as a listening culture device and creating that psychological safety?
Yeah, I think it's important sometimes when you do build those peer groups to make sure that the manager isn't in those peer groups until you build that comfortability. That's a good thing, Matt. So it's peers, and I think it's interesting too to if you have a big enough organization to have peer groups of people in different departments. So you don't, you know, a lot of times we talk to just one department at a time or our own department. But I've facilitated groups as being an HR professional of all different departments. And it's interesting to hear similar and the differences between what the feedback is when you get a group of peers um, at the same level within an organization, but also different departments.
Yeah. I think you said something important there about having it facilitated. So it's important if you're going to put together a peer group, have them know the purpose, decide is it going to be facilitated by somebody internal? Are you going to bring in a different facilitator? What are you hoping comes out of this peer group? Uh, but also being open to whatever else might come out of it, because what you hope might come out of it might not be what you get.
Yeah.
And then we got to do back to feedback, closing the loop, and all that.
Everyone loves it here. Oh no, I guess they do. That's just me. It's just me. What would be so let's say we implement this type of listening culture. We've got our channels set up, everything's organized, we've even got some peer groups. How will we know that started to achieve some psychological safety? What would be some signs of this in our organization?
I think you're hearing the tough things in the meetings and not in the meeting after I hear the meeting.
Yes.
That it's not being whispered in the hallways, that we can actually say it and deal with it, wrestle with it. Yeah. And we don't have to solve it immediately. Yeah. But we can get some movement on it. Yeah.
So if your organization currently doesn't enjoy that kind of back and forth and wrestling in a safe space, maybe this is something that could be worked on. What would you say are the most important ideas or pieces of information to bring to the executive leadership team to sell this concept?
Yeah, from my lens, it's really about, how does this align with our overall strategy that we're accountable for, and making that business case that if it's a retention issue, it's a cost reduction issue, if it's an efficiency opportunity within the organization. Those are some of the things that from the C-suite, my ears are going to peak up to pay attention to, or just even the alignment to achieve these strategies. Here are some tools and steps to put in place with these listening groups to help benefit that. The other thing that I'd be looking for is then how do we measure that and understand that that truly is going to work? And so coming to the table early on in that conversation with what those measurables are, the outcomes, so that the C-suite can connect the dots for that business case and then have the buy.
That is awesome. Yes, I think that sometimes if you're an HR leader, our bent is to speak from the heart and why this is great for employees, why this is wonderful for our culture. But we forget that there's a business alignment. Yeah, that we need to bring the data forward because businesses make decisions based on data. You know, how is this actually going to impact our business? Some things are a little hard to measure, but not everything. We can measure some things. Before we go to the breakout rooms, what else would anyone like to add about how to build this structure? Maybe some really important do's and some equally important don'ts.
I guess I'd share one of the observations that I've had with these groups in the past is that the environment matters. So we were sharing that a little bit at the beginning of before we went on live. It's just if you can create and remove barriers, like a barrier would be a desk. A barrier is a chair that's higher than your audience's chair. So creating an opportunity where you're having a conversation, if it's one on one, where you're sitting at the same level, that there isn't an object in front of you, that it creates more of an intimate moment and more vulnerable moment for both people in the conversation. But even if you're able to move into a larger group where the environment is more like a living room with you up, where there's more soft seating or again, just the ability to just grab a pillow, and hug onto that while you're having conversation. I found that the what you hold close, you relax. And all of a sudden, what you really feel tends to flow a little more freely, but it still feels like a family environment. So there's still this the rules for respect is in the room. But it just changes the whole atmosphere versus this is being done in a meeting room around a table or boardroom table. So look for those opportunities within your environment or in an external environment that just changes the dynamic of the conversation.
Another thing to keep in mind too, because we have a lot of great capabilities when it comes to technology and data collection. And as I mentioned earlier, using AI too for some of this. And we need to be very mindful about how we're communicating with people, the confidentiality around it, their respect with integrity with that data, making sure that employees know how this information is going to be used if we are using technology to do this. And then at the end of the day, there is the human component that is needed in these conversations, in gathering this feedback. So, yes, the technology can help us, but the human component is the most important piece of this.
I think a key part for leaders as you're considering this is looking at yourself and your ego and what are you bringing or not bringing into the room that's not helping elicit. I think a key part that you talked about before, Sandy, was emotional intelligence. Like that's what all of this is. And as a leader, it's a requirement these days. You can't just be good at hitting your KPIs and all those parts. Still very important, but now as a leader, there's this added element of emotional intelligence. And that I believe is a skill that you could build. If you don't have it, it's time to start working on it now, especially as the drive and the need for connection goes higher and higher as we add more technology in.
I would say for me, it's don't wait for the exit interview. Implement the stay interviews. Those are, I've done those before, and that just the amount of valuable feedback you get from those and the relationship building, um, and just the amount of information you're able to garner from those has just been amazing. And you're really able to get a pulse on the organization and really build that trust. So I strongly recommend that being a feedback channel that is considered.
I could not agree more with these sentiments. And I would say, too, with those stay interviews, don't discount early life cycle. So, meeting with employees in the first 2 weeks, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, these are critical moments. We all know that no job is exactly the way you thought it would be, but some things can be changed or altered to make this the perfect place for your new employee to dig in, and we would want to surface some concerns that they might be having before they become embedded beliefs about our organization. So I would definitely not ignore early life cycle or ongoing, but certainly those early life cycle listening opportunities for them. All right. Well, now it is time for us to go ahead and go into our breakout rooms. And so we do have facilitators and note takers in these breakout rooms. You'll be put into those rooms. You don't have to take notes or anything like that. You can just focus on engaging and sharing perspective and wrestling with this concept. How does it work where you are? Focusing on our break room question. How does your organization solicit feedback from employees? What does that mean where you are? So let's go ahead and go to the breakout, and then we will come back and discuss the emerging themes. Hello, everybody, and welcome back from your breakout sessions. We're so excited to see a lot of themes have been emerging. So we're taking a look at those right now, and I see on my screen an extra box if you can close that box. So I can see those themes. That's perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and really dig into these. It's great you've had a chance to share some perspectives in your groups. So let's reconvene and have that talk. So, how does our organization solicit feedback? Was our question. And we see quite a few bullets on the screen. I think everyone can see that screen. One of the comments here is that the employee engagement survey can get really lengthy, though, and the same every year, year over year. Um, Panel, why do we always want to do the same survey year over year?
You want to see the trends.
And that's really important. Yes. Yes. We're looking for trends.
Yeah.
That way, and you can supplement that with shorter pulse surveys if you want to get some quicker feedback and kind of break it on. So that's an option too.
Right. It's good to get some little pulse surveys going on. What are the employees really looking for in this specific regard? Benefits, let's say, or our training, or this speaker that we had. So great for pulse surveys, but to really measure how are we doing in these initiatives to make this a great place to work. Uh, really want to have the same questions asked so you can measure those, get those metrics.
And I would say from the C-suite side that when those change and they're not consistent from my chair, it becomes less meaningful because I'm looking for the patterns, I'm looking for the trends to see if the investment of time uh, or the effort into the listening sessions are paying off and changing anything within the culture or allowing us to move consistently in a positive direction. But if the questions keep changing, then it's like really hard to focus in on it. And then from the C-suite chair, I'll become a lot more less engaged in the process and support it a lot less without that stability of consistency.
And I think this also lends great opportunity too, because sharing the results with staff in a timely manner is incredibly important. So we took the information from the survey. Here are the results. And this gives the opportunity for, and here's the why. We heard you last year when you said you needed to see change in X, Y, and Z. We saw change. Here are some of the things we did and see the results now. And so it's closing that loop.
I love that because that even goes for new hires.
Yes.
And they are able to see that too coming into the culture and they're hearing, like, I didn't participate in that, but this is part of what I'm going to be joining in. That's a powerful thing, especially personally. That's cool.
Yeah, those are great. I'd be curious if you could, if it is lengthy, can we cut it in half into a one half 6 months, the other half another 6 months? If that's feedback you're getting within the survey that the survey's too long, there's opportunity there where you don't have to lose the trend data. We just shift where we're doing it or when we're doing it.
I think too, communication. So if the team knows this is why we're doing this and this is what we're gaining from it and how we can share with you and pull you in to the process of shaping our culture, if they're seeing that why behind the survey, otherwise I do agree that they'll probably think, sheesh, again, it's so tedious. But if they know that their voice is actually being considered, that would be huge.
The caveat that I would add to that, depending on what business you're representing, is there seasonality within the business that you have? So if you're in a retail environment, let's just say, like a Macy's type of a store, you have seasonal hiring for the holidays, and that may be a beneficial time to have a survey that's targeting the seasonality with the business. Again, still important to have the repetitive year over year questions, but you may say, hey, we've got temporary hires that are coming up, and what do we want to know from that experience? And then when it goes back to maybe steady state from labor pool, I think then that's a different type of a survey. So seasonality in it, even from a manufacturing perspective, there could be some seasonality where you ramp up or overtime is uh, more aggressive in the culture, and you may want to figure out like how is that impacting the overall the mental health of the staff, the energy level of the staff. So some of those seasonality index could be beneficial.
Absolutely. Excellent. So then we have employees sharing feedback directly with the manager. Sounds like that's a feedback channel. And what has experience shown us with that as far as seeing that in our own organizations or those that we advise?
I think there's a question. I think getting feedback from your employees is fantastic. The question becomes, can they also give feedback to the manager about the manager? Right, back to the psychological safety. Is that possible? Or are we not safe enough there that we have to find a different collection channel for that until we can get to that point?
Right. I think it is important to recognize that building a listening culture will not immediately result in a psychologically safe environment where people really are honest and transparent about how they feel about the place they work. So it's definitely a work in progress.
And I do think that sharing feedback directly with the manager, and I'm not entirely sure what type of feedback they were discussing in this breakout room. However, the manager is that front line and to the employees, and oftentimes the most important person, right? The ones that they're going to be closest with, hopefully sharing back with. And so this is a space where I would say we absolutely need to train those leaders. Often, sometimes they're new. They didn't receive a lot of in depth training on emotional intelligence, listening with empathy, how to handle conflict and tough feedback. And so that's where, training can be so important. And it's not just enough anymore to say, well, I'll take my time and get better at it, but it's imperative to lead with empathy, listen, especially with all the things going on right now. And I know it sounds a little cheesy, but I always put my little cap on with the Spider-Man quote, "With great power comes great responsibility." As a leader, you have great responsibility to take care of people. Part of that is to create that environment of safety and listening.
And I think something that we offer here is we have a great leadership development program that can help with new, especially particularly with new managers. And part of that is we talk about giving and receiving feedback and train on that emotional intelligence piece, which is something new to a lot of new managers.
100%. And if the leader isn't actively involved in growing that area and providing that safety to their own team, the listening program just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So you're not going to get honest feedback. So that training is really important. And we talked about it a little bit before that. It's a big mindset shift going from authoritative and directive and my way or the highway. That's a long time ago. But not everyone has had the chance to explore what it looks like to change how you work with your own staff. So it is really important to get that training for those leaders too. So let's talk now about stay interviews, exit interviews, and then the next bullet is weekly, monthly, quarterly one-on-ones or weekly meetings with all. So these are all great feedback channels. I think they're a little bit different, but let's talk about those a little.
Something that's really important because as you see, there's the gumbo there of all the different ways that you can collect feedback. But to do this well and with intentionality, put structure in there and accountability measures so that we know each of our leaders are polling their staff and checking in. That we're staying on top of feedback channels. We get so busy that are we circling back and connecting in a timely way? So I would say one of the most important things to do is it doesn't matter which of all of these channels you pick, be consistent with it, put some structure there, and make sure to check back for accountability that it's being done.
making sure the managers know what to do with the feedback is real. If I get it, and then if they immediately go into problem solving mode, and maybe it's more a larger issue than just one that they can solve themselves. So making sure that that gets escalated appropriately.
Let's take a step now to issues and talk about the balance between tech and human interaction. Wow, this is perfect for the headlines today, isn't it? That, we want to utilize AI, but what's the balance? What's the balance there?
I think it's different for every company, which is what makes it so tough. But think about, I mean, as a leader, your own interaction, take a survey of yourself. How many times in a week do you talk to an actual person versus are you just sending emails? And, that's like when we're talking about tech, that's on the very low end of things. We're very familiar with email. To now when we add even more tech in, we add surveys and things like that. How much face-to-face human interaction are people getting? Because in a given day, people only feel heard about 5% of their day. Yeah, 5%. So if you as a manager can help increase that 5% for your direct report from 5 to 10%, it's still not great, but now you've doubled it for them. And what does that do for their commitment to their work, their ability to be honest with what is going on, for them to hear what you have to say as well? And so thinking about, man, how much human interaction is happening. And by the way, also ask your people. There are some, our introverts out there that they really want that one-on-one conversation. They do not want to have that weekly meeting where they have to share out and things like that. How can we accommodate that, but also still meet the business goals and objectives?
Good. How do you encourage leaders to listen more and talk less? What are your tips and tricks, Pam?
I think for myself being a leader,
One sheet of it. Figure it out. Let me know.
uh, you know, for me, has worked for me personally. I go into my meetings, especially the one-on-ones that I have with my staff, with an agenda set in advance. So I send the agenda to them in advance, but I keep the agenda very, very simple. I also like to set time limits to no more than 30 minutes. Um, Prevents us from getting lost in the weeds, prevents us from talking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But the agenda is very simple. The first question I ask is, how are they doing personally? Not work related. I'm just doing a quick check in on how they are, but I'm very specific with the words. And they know that question is coming because it's in their invite of and asking these 3 questions over the 30 minutes. So I check in on how they're doing personally. This is family life, kids sick, pet sick, new dog, whatever. Then I give them the second questions, how are they doing professionally? And so then I bring it into work, and again, it's just about them. And then the next thing comes into the projects, just project updates. So that has helped, at least for me and my leadership style, talk less in those meetings because it prepares them in advance to know what they're talking to me about. So where talking really ends up being more asking more questions because again, it's that self-discipline. I can't ask questions outside of the scope of what we talked about. So my questions are, how are you doing? Within the personality, it'll tell me more about your pet that you just lost, exploring that, but I can't go off into the weeds. And so those are just some self-imposed, but the 30-minute timeline helps me do that, to honor their time. It doesn't allow for much more, but the weekly one-on-ones gives me the frequency to still do things. That's been a tool that I've worked personally.
I think that's fantastic. I think coming back to tech, something that I did uh, in my own business is I had an AI helper in, and after the meeting, it gave a summary of the percentage of how much I talked and how much the employee talked. And you got to decide what that ratio is, but there was a lot more speaking on my side than I even thought was happening to do a self check. And then on the other side of that, I think about how do you encourage leaders to listen more? We've talked about is if they have to be trained. Listening is a skill. Just because you've got 2 ears doesn't mean you listen. So that you got to do training. You have to have some help, some support, and that is normal and that is okay. And as leaders, if we are not continuously growing and learning, then why would our people do that without us setting the example?
I think you said something when we were on break that was really impactful, that you ask a question back to leaders. I don't know if you want to share that. Like, what did you hear me say?
Oh yeah, that was really cool. Yes, yeah. Giving the feedback to a leader, especially if you've done a survey and you're gathering something about how is this leadership showing up for this person, and then giving them that feedback. Sometimes it's tough with our ego to actually hear what somebody has to say. So you give the feedback and then say, "What did you hear me say?" And have them repeat it back in their own words. And then you get into a deeper conversation of, okay, yes, this was, you got that. Here's where we're missing, or here's where we need a little bit more meat on.
More listen, yes, you understanding. Yeah.
Well, those are great tips and tricks, but I think my takeaway is it doesn't come naturally. Leaders are talkers. And so it is something to be worked on, and training can be had, and efforts can be made, and people can grow in their curiosity even from the leadership seat. So let's see. Why do employees not share? Wow. That's a great topic. So it says sometimes it's easier to not get involved and you don't want to be on the radar, or you feel like, why bother? Nothing ever changes, right? So, talking about that and building those trust foundations where people really feel like they are part of the answer. How do we do that?
Um, you mentioned the nothing's going to be done. That follow up and again, that connect to action is incredibly important. Even when it's things that are small to start showing momentum in that space. I had one leader who was making a very strong uh, case for creating this culture, a lot of effort around it. And one of the recommendations that had popped up, somebody said, we should do a Wings Wednesday. Um, and so we had a Wings Wednesday, but it wasn't about the wings. It was about, we got some feedback and we want to make sure that we're following up and showing that we could do some of these things.
Mhm.
But if people feel like they can, even off the cuff, share with you some feedback and they see action, that'll have more and more people sharing.
Thing that comes to my mind on that is just what system do you have in place to ensure that the feedback happens? So if you're going into these listening sessions and there isn't a strategy, there's no system to do anything with the information, it's guaranteed to die and it's going to continue to poison the culture. So from the C-suite perspective, that would be a challenge I would have is what system do you have in place to ensure that doesn't happen, and be thinking of that in advance and even be prepared to share that with the C-suite. Because those are some of the things that we're going to look for is just, it's not just another idea that just falls into the radical, but that from A to Z, it's got accountability and the system to back it up.
No, I think you need a true process and trust the process. Continue to execute the process so you can have that good growth. So, last question. Um, Change can be scary. Changing the way things have been done takes a lot of effort and can be met with resistance. Very true. What would you say about that? This is our last topic that we can cover.
Change is scary for people because it's unknown. And our brains, when something becomes unknown, we don't think about the best case scenario. We think about the worst case scenario. And that's how we've evolved and survived, which is great, but it's not fantastic. It works against us when change is happening. And so if people have a choice of imagining the best thing, the worst thing, their brain is going to go to the worst thing. And so we have to recognize that and go through uh, and give as much detail as we can, as often as we can, asking questions. Okay, here's this change happening. What is the question that you have? Like I had a client who they were moving buildings. And one of the big questions that people had was, where are we going to park? Which seems like such a small, silly question, but they were stressed about it. And where are we going to park? Another one was, where are we going to put our boots in the winter in this new place? Right. And as a leader, you're like, oh, this is the silliest thing. We've got so many other strategic things, but they're worried about that. And if they're worried about it, it means they're not going to be able to do their best work. And so can we get those answers to them and relieve that? And now it's less scary. And now I've got some more notes. And so I can do this. I can make this happen.
I would see those kinds of things as an opportunity for a quick win. So you've got that going on. So, all right, let's go ahead and move now from breakout themes to Q&A. And let's hear from you, some questions you might have for our panel before we wrap up. So looking in the chat, I do see a couple of great comments that the heart and the data always needs to be connected. I think this is part of answering the C-suite's questions too, right? And so how can we make that connection so that we're sure that the heart and the data are actually connected?
That was a great question. Oh, yeah, when you connect it, at least from the C-suite perspective, again, it's a reminder of what we're saying the culture is supposed to be, and then using the data and the heart, because usually the strategy has a lot of heart in it. Um, and so that's where I would make the case. Use the language of the strategy, use the language of the C-suite. 'Cause that's gonna get the attention to both the data and the heart, is aligning the language, with the language of the C-suite.
That is great. That is great. Um, and then I have not another question, but there was a really good comment in the chat. And if you're looking at the chat, there was a link to an article that one of the participants recommended. So just want to call attention to that. So
Just a quick question.
end of our questions. I can see it. I can see it.
Audrey.
Can you hear me? I have a quick question.
Oh, perfect.
Jeff, totally going to put you on the spot because I know you've done a fabulous job representing the C-suite. I'm curious if you've ever had sort of an executive 360 evaluation from direct reports, peers, stakeholders in your tenure.
Yes, I have. I've had that in my corporate retail side, and then I've had it in the nonprofit side. Actually, it was just 2 years ago before a new CEO came on board. So it was used for me to grow as a leader, but also for my new boss, the new CEO, to understand where the culture and the staff felt, how they felt about me as a leader in the lead operating role. Um, so yeah, it can be a little bit intimidating. I'm curious by nature, so I really wasn't all that affected by hearing about it. I was really excited about the feedback that I got. So when you have that curious, uh, I guess, part of your personality, you take that in and apply the learning. So in my case, I enhanced the wins where people said, "Hey, we really like this about Jeff's leadership style." But then I also took to heart and put to task some of the things that I needed to do better for the team. Um, but yeah, I've had some colleagues that were really fearful of it and felt like they really got raked over the coals. And I think again, that's part of the perspective of the leader that comes into there. But yeah, it is a big ask for somebody to go through a 360. But again, I go back to what is the system, so that once the 360 has been delivered to the leader, what happens next? And I think that's really important to the culture. Where there was an action plan for me, and I was able to share that with my staff, so that they didn't know who said what. I didn't know who said what. I just was able to talk about the themes of, this is the theme that you really appreciate on my leadership style. Here's areas that I need to work on and I need help, and what I'm going to do about it. So it created, again, a transparency and an accountability piece in it. Again, I go back to, it's the system that was put into place. So it wasn't a report that landed on my desk and died. So the system is my biggest recommendation for the 365, is can't just land on the desk and die.
100%.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, I you I haven't asked anybody who has had that level of evaluation that hasn't, you're right, it can be scary, that hasn't, whether it was quick or later, really, learned something, appreciated the perspective of understanding how others perceive you. So sounds like that was your experience as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's a great way to build trust too. So, all right. So before we wrap up, a quick thank you to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and your genuine heart for culture. We appreciate you and we're grateful for you. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Thanks for the thoughtful questions. Those are some deep questions, and not all of them were easy, softballs either. So thank you for that. And for your commitment to creating these workplaces where we have a listening culture. So next steps here on the screen, we have a little sneak peek. Our next cafe is Beyond the Buzz AI in the Workplace. We're going to be joined by AI optimization experts who will cut through the hype and get practical with us. So you can use that QR code to reserve your seat today. We were sold out today, so I wouldn't wait too long. And then the next QR code, please go ahead and scan that for your free gift. We've got a 100-day launch guide for cultural listening to help get you started. So also, I know that we talked through these things and we shared a lot of great information. Our panels were absolutely amazing. And we might have made it look easy, but we recognize it isn't. If you are sitting there today and thinking, wow, I saw a lot of value, but I still feel stuck, please don't hesitate. Just drop us a call, drop us an email. We would love to connect with you and just kind of walk you through it. All right. And so finally, before you head out for the rest of the day, we would love to get your feedback on today's Collaborative Cafe so that we can always be improving what we're doing together. So thank you very much, and we will release you back to your busy days.